The implementation of 197A plans is extremely complicated and vague, and often city planning goes ahead and engages and passes other projects which may contradict the 197A plan. An interesting example is what Community Board 9 in Manhattan went through. A second point, New York City does not have a comprehensive plan, and I have not listened to all of the testimony at the Charter Commission, but I was quite struck when I was able to hear it on streaming and so on, the number of very responsible planners and others, of whom sometimes I hope I am one, who questioned this kind of stranglehold of a so-called comprehensive plan, which will tend to take almost every initiative away from the localities, will be vague, will be bureaucratic, and will not help in either efficiency or clarity. There are so many, if you look at the testimony, of a lot of different interests and very responsible people who questioned the establishment of a comprehensive plan, which will serve to be vague, lengthy, confusing, and not do what the rest of this statement does, which I do think has merit, and that is to be able to clarify and to communicate in an accessible form to community boards and others, and have all of these plans in a digital fashion available to community boards with time for comment. So I would question this whole thing about the comprehensive plan, which is just incoherent and will not help what we all would like to see happen.
The way the resolution or the testimony is organized, the comprehensive plan is simply the title.
Richard, could you speak up?
The comprehensive plan is the title of what the Charter Commission is looking at. This resolution does not advocate for the creation of a comprehensive plan. To the contrary, this resolution advocates to make available all of the other plans in one place in an indexable manner. So we're not asking for a comprehensive plan. As to 197A, I think we should probably add something that requires the city, upon presentation of a plan for 197A, to fund it appropriately, and we can work on that.
I just want to say thank you to the Charter Commission for accepting some of my 11th Hour Charlie additions. I just wish that when people go down and testify, if they write their own letter, that they amplify what we've said here, write your own pieces. I will do mine, because I'm very disappointed with the amount of effort that community boards put in, that we're still considered advisory and can be dismissed. And I would love, maybe in the next 10 years, the next generation of CBs can work on that. But thank you for incorporating my changes.
I also want to thank the Charter Revision Task Force members for a yeoman's job working on. It was a long document. We got it like a week or 10 days prior to our meeting, and we tried to cover those things that affected our community board. And I thank Richard for setting up having a rationale, and Richard and I wrote it together, and having the rationale for why we're doing things, I think, is very helpful. If there are no further questions, I'd like to call the question. All those in favor?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. Thank you.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7.
This carries, and it will be rewritten with a few comments, and it will be read and left with the commission on Thursday. Again, I recommend that everybody write testimony of their own to the commission. We've just been joined by Rosie Mendez from Borough President Gail Brewer's office, who will speak to us a little bit later. So we're now going to go into the community session. I'm going to ask everyone to speak for just 1 minute. We're asking you to line up behind this. First speaker is Peter Arnston, followed by Bob Wyman, followed by Tiffany Bryant. If you could just all line up.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Peter Arnston with the Columbus Amsterdam Bid. On the back table, I have our events calendars for north of 96th Street from the Columbus Amsterdam Bid. A couple of things that you should know is that we still have bulbs blooming, and that you should come up and check out our restaurants. Sidewalk cafes are now opening up between 96 and 110. In our events calendar, we have a variety of music offerings, but this Thursday, as in 2 days from now, is going to be a history talk on the waterfront. It'll be at the youth hostel. It'll start at 6:30. It's free, so come on out for that. There will also be a walking tour, a history walking tour on Wednesday, the 15th at 6 p.m. And then on the 20th, there will be a legal landmarks looking at buildings that were involved in legal issues on the west side. And that'll be presented all again at the youth hostel. And one other thing was on Saturday the 18th, there's an open house for the Second Presbyterian Church, which is one of the oldest congregations in the city and was historic for a variety of reasons. So I'll finish that. I'll stop.
Yeah, 1 minute's new policy, but anyway, you guys know for the last 10 years or so I've been talking to you about clean heat. I'd like to thank the board for all of its support in the past. Also, I want to warn you about a brewing nightmare, which is publicly known to a party in the rate case, and been looking over their finances, and we've got other people working on this. As you know, the state has a policy to reduce carbon emissions 80% by 2050. The city does as well. The city also just passed legislation saying that our largest buildings over 25,000 need to reduce their carbon footprint 40% by 2030. Clearly, this means that our consumption of fossil fuels, and particularly our consumption of gas, will be reduced over the next 20 to 30 years. It is important to understand that Con Edison recovers the cost of its gas assets over an 85-year period. For mains, and 65 years for the service connection between mains and buildings. What this means is that over the next 30 years, even though we will be dramatically reducing the cost of the consumption of gas, we will continue to be paying the full price, okay, for the gas network for the next 85 years. This is what is called stranded assets, and it's hundreds of millions of dollars that are already accumulated. We already have $300 million right now. It's going to be coming to master. Worry about that.
Tiffany will be followed by Zachary Campbell, followed by Melissa Diaz, followed by Jennifer Farr. Should all line up.
Hello, I am Tiffany Bryant from the Public Theater. I'm here to give a quick update.
Come closer to the.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's better.
Is it on?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry. Tiffany Bryant from the Public Theater. I'm here to give a quick update on Shakespeare in the Park. This summer we are having Much Ado About Nothing, Coriolanus, and they will both run for 5 weeks. And then we'll have a public works production of Hercules that will run for the first week in September. And then some information about how to get tickets, most important. A reminder, all performances are free and available to all. So on the day of each performance, free tickets can be acquired in person at the Delaware Theater in Central Park through a digital lottery via Today's Text, in person at borough distribution sites, and an in-person lottery in the lobby of the Public Theater downtown. I have some information back there about it. And then lastly, I just wanted to give a quick update. As many of you may have read, in the fall that Delaware Theater is going to be undergoing a renovation, and we invite you to take a look at our website for more information on that. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Zach Campbell. I'm the community liaison at the American Museum of Natural History. Here to provide you again with an update on the Richard Gilder Center project. As you may know, last month, the New York State Supreme Court Appellate Division dismissed the challenge to the American Museum of Natural History's Gilder Center for Science, Education, and Innovation, and unanimously affirmed the lower court ruling in the museum's favor in December. Last month, I reported that we had been hard at work continuing selective interior removals of several building components of the buildings slated for removal. So interior removals are now complete. We've also completed the work to disconnect all of the internal systems in those buildings, and that's water, electrical, etc., and decommission those buildings themselves. We've also completed some additional tree pruning and care for the trees that were within our site. So currently, we're working on installing the necessary protections for the museum buildings that are adjacent to those 3 buildings that are slated for removal. And we've also actually started to begun dismantling building 16, which is the glass pavilion. The contractor is removing the glass facade, starting at the top and working down to the ground level. The work is being accomplished with hand tools, creating minimal noise. The anticipated number of trucks per day entering the site are approximately 2 to 3 for these operations. Aside from the lifts needed to remove the building structure itself, there will be container trucks and an excavator brought on site for this work. We continue to work with the community board and keep you appraised of the project with regular updates, and the community at large informed of upcoming construction activities with regular emails for our Gilder Center subscriber list. You should have seen one go out today. If you haven't signed up for it, please do so. The information to do that is on our website at amnh.org. Look for the Gilder Center, and you'll be directed to sign up for the links. We also post the updates to our project news section. Thank you.
I have a question. Why is there a sidewalk bridge almost 200 feet long on Columbus Avenue? That's maybe 150 or 200 feet from the construction. Is that really necessary? I mean, it seems pretty outrageous to close the sidewalk so far from construction. Couldn't you make some plan that allows that sidewalk to be open and access by a drive to the construction site?
So I think the answer to that is essentially twofold. The first piece is that the logistics for the project were reviewed heavily during the EIS, and that was determined to be the best configuration for the actual construction. And the second part of the answer is that while that may seem the case now, as activities begin to ramp up, the site itself will be used significantly more than we may have seen in the past. So yes, it will be used.
So good evening, everyone. My name is Jennifer. I work at the St. Agnes branch of the New York Public Library. Just letting everyone know that right now the New York Public Library, all the branches throughout the whole city, we're facing millions of dollars in possible budget cuts, so which could mean a reduction in hours and a reduction in programs. In addition to these cuts, we're actually asking for $35 million to be added to the budget just need to contact. In recent years, the city has asked us for help with many very important initiatives that address New Yorkers most in need. We've gladly accepted these challenges and have opened new branches, offered new programs. We've partnered with city agencies like the Department of Corrections and the Department of Homeless Services to really create library spaces beyond our four walls. We've really just expanded our definition of what libraries are. So that's really why we're asking for the additional funding. So what I'm asking of you tonight is, when you get a chance, if I know you all support libraries, so just more of a gentle reminder than a plea. If you could just go to our website, www.nypl.org, and sign a letter of support. Or you can come in to one of the branches and sign an actual letter. We have limited edition pins that we can give out, and also and also bracelets. So thank you so much. I just want to thank everyone for the years of support that you've all provided for us, and also the past members. So yeah, I know we can count on you guys. So
Thanks. Is there council testimony for the mayor's final budget scheduled for this initiative yet? And their council
That's a really
reps
good
in the audience,
question.
you guys know that when you come up, you can say.
yeah, I'm not sure. I can look into that, but I know when we do something.
Maybe we can go, because our board supported the initiatives that you've asked as a
Oh, I
budget
know,
priority.
yeah.
So if we go down and testify, that of course will do the trick.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I will certainly share that information.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're going to invite Lieutenant Jared Badillo from the 20th precinct to come up and do a quick staff report. And he will be followed by Sam Strangley and Deborah Brown.
Good evening, folks. My name is Lieutenant Jared Badillo. I am the Integrity Control Officer of the 20th Precinct. Standing for the respective amounts of the vacant, but real quick, I just want to talk to you guys about the crime stats that we've had in the past 28 days. The past 28 days, we've had, you guys hear me? No. Okay. The past 28 days, we've had a significant decrease in crime. We've had a 21% decrease in index crimes and serious crimes. In the year to date, from January 1st to May 5th, we've also showed a 27% decrease in overall crime, which is third best out of all 77 precincts. One area of that's with the help of all of you guys. One area of concern that we had in the last couple of weeks, we've had a spike in high-end cars. Their side mirrors have been being taken. So we do have some good information, and our detectives are doing night and day round-the-clock work on that. We do ask from you guys is to continue helping us out. Continue to be our eyes and ears. If you guys are sleeping in the middle of the night, you hear a car alarm go off, and you look out your window, you see everybody suspicious, please call it in. You guys are not bothering us when you do that. If it turns out to be nothing, we'd rather have it that way. So please, I can't stress that enough. Continue to call us no matter what it is. I might put that right. If you guys have any questions for me, yes.
I do. I'm not sure on 98 and Weston Avenue.
That's not this precinct. This is the 20th precinct.
Okay. Somebody, one of the police have the ability to come through their loudspeaker on the car, and they're constantly like, hey, you a-hole, such a bad burn, or whatever. They're like, what? Talking out loud on the speaker.
We can send it.
Yes.
We can send an email to the 2-4. All right, thank you so much. If anyone has any questions, he'll be outside.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Deborah Brown. I'm with the West 69th Street Block Association. I'm sure you've all read about it in the Times, what's going on with the Mega Mansion under construction and really disrupting our daily lives. The wave of problems is reaching unprecedented proportions, affecting residents on both West 69th Street and West 68th Street that abuts the site. It's tragic beyond words to know that my next-door neighbor, who was in hospice for a few weeks before he died, drew his last breath with the emissions from the drilling 2 doors away. It's tragic beyond words that babies trying to nap, toddlers and pregnant women are exposed to the 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. drilling, while their parents wring their hands wondering if the environment is safe for their children. West 69th Street is comprised of families with children, young people starting out in their careers who can barely afford the rents that are they're just not affordable. Long-time residents, senior citizens, ranging from those just eligible for Medicare to those well in their 90s.
Thank you. Next will be Sam Prangley, followed by Karen Keller.
Hi, good evening. I'm Sam Prangley. I'm here as a volunteer for the Sierra Club. There is a peaker plant, otherwise known as a plant that is a power plant, and it's here in our neighborhood on 12th between 58th and 59th. I have a petition with me. I like everyone who agreed to sign it because this plant is a huge polluter in our neighborhood. It emits half a ton of NOx, which is nitrogen oxide, every 3 hours that it runs. Now, this plant does not run all the time. It is a peaker plant. It only runs, let's say, at times in the summer where there's an awful lot of power that's needed because everyone coming home from work will use their air conditioners at the same time. So, of course, we're really happy right now with what Governor Cuomo is doing, but by having this type of petition, we're just giving him an extra push and reminding him of his environmental commitments to all of us to lower, to make New York State 100% renewable energy by 2040. So if you can sign the petition, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is the petition also available online? If people can sign it right now?
It's not.
So maybe you want to put it online.
I think you would like to, but I think right now they want to do a hard copy to be able to.
If you're going to take it outside, if anyone wants to sign it.
Oh,
See that. Okay, sure. Kara will be followed by Penny Shaw, and Penny Shaw will be followed by Eileen Vasquez.
Good evening. My name is Kara Kelly, and I'm with the West 69th Street Block Association. We think the board needs to weigh the impact of construction projects like 50 West 69th Street have on the residents and be prepared to say no to excessive construction on residential streets and landmark blocks. These kinds of projects are increasing in our city, and their impact on the residents must be factored in the approval process. We're not talking about the usual construction annoyances. This is extreme. They're drilling down 2 stories through bedrock. Residents have been forced to move, others to stay with friends and relatives to escape the noise and emissions. So much suffering for one single family house to be built, not a building for 10 families, not a school, not a hospital, not a senior housing center, a one family house. This project's scope and the depth of the excavation was not a surprise. It's in the record. The committee itself was concerned by the extreme amount of demolition and construction so significant that it triggers seismic code. With a project of this scale, we really think the Department of Buildings should do an audit. Thank you.
Do you know who approved the?
Excuse me. I'm sorry.
Oh, we get no questions?
No questions. The board, this came before the board as the building that they're talking about came before community board a few years ago. It was a preservation issue. The community board has.
Did you read exactly what they were?
Yes, and we did not, we.
I read it here. I can't even believe that. No, that's shocking. You approved it?
No.
No, we did not approve it. If you let me speak, if you let me speak, you'll understand.
I lived there, so
I grew up on 69th Street, I know the street well, but I know the street well. So you would just let me speak, and then we're not going to have a debate. We're going to go on to the next speaker. The preservation aspects of the building came before Community Board 7. Community Board 7 weighed in on whether the outside building was appropriate or not. There was talk about a swimming pool, and we unequivocally said that we do not approve swimming pools. Department of Buildings is a whole different agency. Department of Buildings is the agency that approved the construction, and Community Board 7 is an advisory. We work very hard to try and maintain a wonderful community that we love, and sometimes we have no say with Department of Buildings, and we are just as frustrated as you. Our next speaker.
So maybe this is something you can do. I bring to your attention a concern regarding the zoning of 50 West 69th Street, same building. I'm from the 69th Street Block Association. It's zoned for residential use, but we're concerned that a zoning change request could be in the future. The concern is based on the owner's business history and additional projects in New York City. Pierre Bastide is a billionaire that has parlayed his business interests from energy to boutique hotels and real estate ventures around the world. Given the scope of the current project, we're concerned that there could be a zoning change request from residential to commercial. This has happened in the past on West 68th Street, and the residents successfully fought that zoning request. Mr. Bastide is also behind the construction of 145 Central Park North, a new residential construction project in partnership with Grid Group, formerly Einhorn Development, who are coincidentally the developers for the project on West 69th Street.
Thank you so much. Your time is up.
Okay. We're asking you to please put in a word that this zoning request is.
Yes, thank you. Next will be Olga Berg, followed by David Chester.
I live on West 69th Street, right across from the construction. A few weeks ago, my children had surgery. They had thousands of them walking into the room with the children recovering from the surgery, filled with visitors undescribable. We are being gassed absolutely every day because the drilling requires them to have a lot of equipment and the compressors and all of that. The important point here, it's not just us. This is the type of construction that's coming from London. They are building down. This is increasing. This is an investment property that's being built for 2 people. This is for 2 people with bedroom for, and my children have to breathe exhausted 2 years. This is unacceptable. I met myself with the building department. They told me in my face that they don't care, and when people pay that much money for the property, they will not control anything. I have it on record on my phone. So we're trying to get people together, write letters, we're going to change the order. It concerns everyone in New York City. We'll see a lot more of that. I'll be here at the end. Please come, give your name, give advice. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Are you Eileen? No, I am.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And Eileen will be followed by Sharon Becklider and then Linda Alexander. Okay.
I'm here. In regards to David Chester, you want to come? In regards to the construction project at West 69th Street, and similar in regards to the construction project at West 69th Street and similar future projects that are bound to plan and request permits, it is imperative that all government agencies review their policies for permit requests and be more inquisitive when reviewing and granting permits. While the concerns regarding graphic design being in keeping with neighborhoods and neighboring buildings is important, I don't believe anyone who granted these permits took a moment to think about the impact on people living on the street. Start asking, what does that mean? What does that mean to have heavy equipment breaking bedrock for hours each day, digging in excess of 30 feet? It means permanent hearing loss, tinnitus, dust, banging up to 5 buildings east and west of the project. What does it mean to have a permit for 8 parking spots on one street? It means dirty streets and pools of water in the gutter. What does it mean to have heavy equipment that releases emissions? It means it seeps into our apartments or furniture in our bodies. What does it mean to have equipment blocking the street, making it impassable? In one case, it meant parents coming home with a newborn unable to be dropped in their building.
Thank you so much, David.
Hi, I want to talk for a minute about this. Construction on a separate bike path between West 72nd and 83rd in Riverside Park on the Greenway. My understanding is that the community board allocated $200,000 for this project.
No, I believe it's the council member that allocated. We
Yeah,
don't have any,
Rosenthal.
we don't have, no, Helen Rosenthal. We don't have any money.
Oh. I haven't seen any evidence. If anyone knows what's happening with the project, I'd appreciate it. Because as recently as April 8th, a young 4-year-old girl was hit by a bicycle.
Yeah.
So we really still need it.
Thank you. We'll find out. Sean, followed by Linda Alexander.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm Shane Begleiter. I'm president of the West 68th Street Block Association. A moment ago, you heard from the president of the West 69th Street Block Association. All right, you have to realize, I'm just reinforcing the fact that this is a devastating project, 48 and 50 West 69th Street. The number of people here from both 68th Street and 69th Street tonight demonstrate that for you. If I could say get one message across, it would be this. This is supposed to have been a landmark structure, landmarks committee. Several times, presentations like this have come before the community board where they're indicating one course of event to take place. You make a decision on that one course of event to take place. With this project in particular, the board, with the original plan, had lengthy discussions concerning the rear facade, the mundans, the window lineup, the lintels, the fact that it did not line up between both buildings.
Thank you so much. Your time is up.
There is no longer a rear facade to consider. That was removed. All your discussion now is pertaining to a fake, newly to be rebuilt rear facade.
Thank you so much.
very much.
Linda,
We just wanted to remind everybody that the 12th annual Taste of the Upper West Side is the weekend after next, May 17th and May 18th. I left cards on the back. Best way to find out about it is to just go to the website, tasteuws.com.
This is our biggest fundraiser for the neighborhood, the streetscape beautification program, schools, and City Meals on Wheels. And this year, our honoree is the West Side Campaign Against Hunger. 40 years. Contributions, so everything, and it's a lot of fun. So, and the other thing is, if you're up next Sunday morning at 7:30, as most people are on Sunday mornings at 7:30, you'll be broadcast West Side Campaign Against Hunger, and Taste of the Upper West Side will be on WCBS.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to hear from Rosie Mendez, Gale Brewers. We're honored to have you here tonight with us.
Thank you very, can you hear me? Yes. Thank you. This is how you do it. The rappers do it this way for a reason. So, good evening, everyone. I am here because April Adams, who's the liaison to the board, is on her honeymoon. So, congratulate her. Next time you see her in a couple of years, give her your condolences. I want to just give a shout out to all the new appointees to the board who are here tonight. And I want to give my apologies to the current board and the new appointees because of our technical difficulties. We know we created some logistical problems to get the new members boarded on into this meeting, but thank you for bearing with us. And want to make sure you all know, May 29th, next Wednesday, there are no community board meetings throughout Manhattan. We are having our reception for all board members at the American Museum of Natural History. Please come, public members, task force members, as in this board would be, are all welcome. And you can bring your +1. So I hope to see you all there, but you all need to RSVP so we can make sure that we have everything set up for everyone who's going to be there. Just letting you know, the borough president has been involved in 2 lawsuits. She recently filed a lawsuit against the mayor and the city for the Holmes Tower over on the east side. She also filed a lawsuit in 2 bridges in the Lower East Side. And this has to do with the at-a-scale development, with the lack of the ULURP process, with the fact that the community boards in both those different communities were against this project. And there was a lack of transparency in terms of the choosing of the developer
and how this process has moved forward. So we are hoping that through this lawsuit, we will see some change in the way these developments come forward, particularly on public housing land. There was discussion earlier about the Charter Revision Commission. It is on Thursday, the 9th. If you cannot make it, you can send testimony in writing, and you can catch it online and respond to it. I heard someone ask earlier about the city council budget hearings. There are days where the public can come during the executive session and give comments on the budgets and recommendations. What else? Most important. I'm not doing Gail justice. Anyway, the congestion pricing, we expect to have it rolled out in 2020. You're right at the cusp, so you'll be, it's below 60th Street, so you'll be getting some of the impacts or not of what's going to be happening with congestion pricing. The borough president had a hearing last month. It was very well attended down in Cooper Union. And she introduced legislation with Council Member Helen Rosenthal and Speaker Johnson on vacant storefronts so that we can capture the data of which storefronts are empty, how much are they requesting for rent, who are the landlords, to see if we find patterns, and we can only find patterns by getting the data. So we hope to have this legislation passed so that we can make meaningful impact when it comes to these empty spaces. Thank you very much.
Next, we will hear from Julian from Councilmember Rosenthal's office, followed by Liam Galligan from Assemblymember O'Donnell's office.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Julian from Councilmember Helen Rosenthal's office. To follow up on the library's question earlier, the executive budgeting, please mark May 21st on your calendar if you'd like to speak regarding libraries. The hearings begin at 10 a.m. down at City Hall. For community updates, on this Thursday, May 9th, our office will be hosting the Department of Finance for homeowners and renters in our district office. The DOF will be providing screen injury assistance between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. Also on this Friday, May 10th, the free mammogram van will be parked outside of Garden Riverside at the 593 Columbus Avenue location. Lastly, I want to let you know that on May 15th, next Wednesday, we will be hosting a senior resource fair between 4:30 p.m. and 7:30 at Goddard Riverside Senior Center. It's going to be a really good event. We already have over 30 agencies and nonprofits in attendance. And as always, all the flyers for our events are in the back. And please let us know if you have any questions on any of our events or any constituent issues we can give assistance with. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. I'm Liam. I'm with Assemblyman Daniel O'Donnell's office. Just a quick legislative update for y'all. Danny will be supporting the 9 bills in the Housing Justice for All platform. Our rent laws are up for renewal in a month, and we think that these reforms will do a lot to kind of end the displacement crisis and end landlord harassment that has really kind of made life terrible for rent controlled and rent stabilized tenants here in the Upper West Side. 2 more kind of bills that we are really, that are a huge priority for us. One is the Small Business Survival Act, which is similar to the one in the City Council right now. That will provide automatic lease renewals and reasonable rent increases for our small businesses, so we stop seeing vacant storefronts everywhere along the Upper West Side. And the second is for SPREE, the Senior Citizens Rent Increase Exemption Program. Danny's introduced a bill that would exempt Social Security income from that $50,000 maximum, which would push a lot of people in this neighborhood to be eligible for a senior citizens rent increase for years. So last thing is we will also be at the Councilmember Rosenthal's senior citizen event next week. If you want to come and ask questions about quality of life in the district and need help with the city or state agencies. So thank you, and always remember to call our office if you need anything. Thank you.
Next will be Alec Milchak from Dick Gottfried's office, and followed by Saadi Santos from Senator Serrano's office.
Good evening, everyone. Assemblyman Dick Godfrey supports the Green Amendment to the New York State Constitution. The Green Amendment would basically stipulate that every New Yorker has the right to clean air, and clean energy, and environmental protections. The L train slowdown has begun. So if you're traveling to Brooklyn or from Brooklyn to Manhattan, please make sure that you give yourself enough time when traveling. And that is all I have for this month.
Thank you so much.
I actually have a question.
Yes.
So since the Assemblyman isn't here, could he provide a comment on what's going on with the vaccination legislation, given his chairman status of the alcohol committee? Thank you.
I came prepared with the quote from the Assembly.
Great.
We anticipated this. So the Assemblyman has a quote, and I quote, "I am thinking about the issue and have told the sponsor, Assembly Member Jeffrey Dinowitz, that I am willing to put the bill on for consideration by the Health Committee when he can show he has the votes." Close quote.
That's it?
We're followed by Caitlin Terry from Assemblymember Linda Roosevelt's office, followed by Hannah Weideman from Congressman Sanders' office.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Sadia, and I'm here from Senator Jose Serrano's office. He's been very busy in Albany, just passing so many bills. Can't even keep up. One bill that we're very excited passed was Senator Serrano's legislation to identify high local environmental impact zones, which would basically just be sort of a guideline for the Department of Environmental Conservation and other city groups to go forward and have guidelines for zones that are already impacted highly by environmental adversity. Other than that, we passed a lot of other environmental bills and bills to protect our natural resources that we're very happy about. We always do offsite constituent hours all throughout our districts, including in the Upper West Side. So if anyone has any constituents in need of help, please call our office at 212-828-5829. Thanks.
Hi everyone, my name is Caitlin Lettery. I'm from Assemblymember Linda Rosenthal's office. I wanted to highlight today is Attendant Tuesday, so I just wanted to highlight the Assemblymember's support for the Housing Mixes for All platform. She has two bills as the prime sponsor, the bill to ban vacancy decontrol and the bill to reform the system through which rent increases for rent control tenants. And she has had those for many years, and we're really optimistic. Right now, we are in the middle of having 3 statewide hearings. The last one was on Thursday in New York City, and the next one will be on last Thursday, and the next one will be this Thursday in Albany. And it's a really great, turnout on Thursday, and there was some very lively back and forth. And I encourage you to take a look at some of the video from that. It's definitely interesting to watch and very important. And on other legislation for a bill to ban the practice of cat declawing in New York State was voted out of the Assembly Agriculture Committee for the first time. Its next step is the Assembly Codes Committee. And so we are optimistic since it was the first time it was voted out of the Agriculture Committee. And that is about it for my updates. You can find more in back.
One question.
Is the Assembly member involved in all the beginning efforts to overturn your statute?
I'm not sure. I can get back to
That's
that.
important. That's the law that permits the state to control rent stabilization and control rules.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Hi everyone, I'm Hannah Wiener from Congressman Nather's office. Obviously, we've been very busy. Mr. Nather is still demanding the full unredacted Mueller report and all underlying evidence. He is making sure that our checks and balances still exist. He's making sure his committee subpoenas are met and enforced. Tomorrow we'll be holding a vote on whether to issue a contempt citation for the Attorney General Barr for missing his hearing on the second. Just got word that McGann is looking like he's not going to comply with the subpoena to either give any documents or come. So the committee will be, making sure that they use all the powers available to make sure that accountability is enforced. The committee is also working on getting Mueller to testify in front of the committee. He is invited to come before May 23rd. DOJ, Mueller, and the committee staff are all working together to make sure that, Americans know what happened and what the full report says. Despite all that, or in addition to, we also held the first congressional hearing on the ERA in over 30 years. So, the chairman was really pleased to be able to oversee that hearing. In the Judiciary Committee, a bipartisan vote just all unanimously agreed to lower, legislation to lower drug prices. So we are working on that. On a local level, this is not necessarily in this district, but I just wanted to raise it. If you've seen the Fulton houses, there might be a new avenue for development to pay for, major maintenance, construction, repairs, development. So Mr. Nadler led on a letter among the local elected officials that any plan should make sure that residents are not displaced. It will not diminish any tenants' rights or affordability, and it will preserve the community. So I just want to let you know, as things happen around housing, Mr. Nadler is writing and shifting that. If you have any questions, please feel free to follow on this.
She'll be in the back.
Yes, I'll be back.
Next is going to be Alan Valero from the Manhattan DA's office, followed by Asher Bauman from New York State Oilman's office.
Good evening, Community Board 7. My name is Alan Valerio with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. This week and last week, we have two announcements. We announced that two individuals put guilty pleas in a $2.8 million internet drug ring. As we know, a lot of drugs are coming into our country and they're being sold on the black market on dark internet websites. We also convicted an individual who was found guilty of selling over 100 guns to an undercover NYPD detective. As you know, the DA is continuing to ensure that illegal guns and illegal drugs stay off of our street and we remain safe. Thank you so much. If anyone has any questions, I will be in the back.
Hi, everybody. Asher Bauman from State Senator Brad Oilman's office. I'm going to start with two district-related things. But first, I just want to thank everybody who came out from the Block Association. Our office hears you loud and clear, and looking forward to hearing your asks as it relates to the audit, as it relates to this anticipated zoning. So I just want to thank you guys for coming out.
Thank you. Thank you.
Respective times. Thank you. A few weeks ago, led a sign-on letter with several local elected officials regarding 50 West 66th Street, and that sign-on letter was asking the Department of Buildings to, for the duration of the project, stop issuing after-hours variance permits to Excel and Leslie's. Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's enough time to get the job done. We've heard complaints of cement being poured down the drain, of congestion, lots of problems, and we're happy that we have the support of our elected officials there. Senator Oilman is also looking forward to, we haven't done it quite yet, but soon, sending another letter to the Department of Buildings regarding 200 Amsterdam Avenue, joining elected colleagues like Dale Brewer and Holden Rosenthal, calling for a full stop work order on that site, not only because the legality as it pertains to the zoning law is in question, but also because there are noteworthy public safety concerns with not only a large piece of wood falling from the 26th floor a few weeks ago, but some of the complaints say that nails and pieces of wire are falling. And even though the partial stop work order has been lifted, the entrance at Lincoln Towers at 178 Amsterdam Avenue is still blocked. So safety concerns are still there. Legislatively, tomorrow, Senator Oilman's bill that will create a second path to get Donald Trump's state tax returns is coming to a floor vote. We believe we have the votes in both the Senate and the Assembly. We have the government support. We also the Senate passed the Green Amendment, providing for a right to clean air and clean water. Bird-friendly Building Council Act that Brad's passed. because bird collisions from man-made structures killed 1 billion birds a
Thank you
year.
so much.
And several other bills. I'm happy to
And
take
you
your
have
questions.
to back.
Yes, thank you.
I'm going to call the microphone does not reach to the ends of the table, so.
Hi, and welcome to all the new community board members. Congratulations. On the first thing to vote tonight, first resolution is 30 West 61st Street. The building has come to us, there's a temporary no parking zone there now because there's construction going on the street. This is a street we're going to be hearing more about. This is a street we will hear more about. That is 30 West 61st. Because it's on the edge of the congestion pricing area and it's a small street. Specifically today, there's a temporary no parking zone there now because of the construction going on. A very large building that's going to have Target in the base of it, Target for the store. And they come to us and requested that we make that no parking zone a permanent no parking zone because Targets and all of the delivery trucks will be back into a loading zone directly across from this building. And if there are parts, they will get smashed. So, are there any questions? Is there any debate?
There's someone who wants this.
1 second. Yes.
Thank you. I'm Steve Yasnowski, the president of the Beaumont condominium. We are the ones that are requesting this. But something has happened today that is brought to our attention. One of the problems that we've had, or our biggest problem that we've had, is the Parks Department cars parking in front of the building, which of course causes the tie-ups, doesn't allow for egress and ingress. And of course, there's no way of stopping them, even with my understanding is today, a no parking, permanent no parking zone. My understanding is if we change that, if that were changed to a no standing zone, then the Parks Department could not park there either. And that is our understanding. And if that's possible, we'd like to change our request to a no standing zone instead of a no parking zone. Thank you.
Penny or Andrew, do either of you? That's great. Howard, are you okay with that?
Oh, absolutely. I was going to endorse it.
Great. Okay, so we are now asking for a small change of the resolution to make it a no standing zone. Are there any more comments or questions? Anyone from the board? It's okay. All ready to vote? All in favor?
Celebrate now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38. You're on. 39 out of the board members that the chair.
Okay, all those opposed? And those abstaining? 2 people abstaining. Thank you, it passes.
Thanks.
Next will be BCI.
So I'll get started with the easy one. The first one is a liquor license for a new restaurant where Machiavelli used to be on the corner of 84th Street and Columbus Avenue. Everything was in order. We have no questions about it, and so we, at the board, the committee unanimously voted for it. So we call the question.
What are we voting
Okay, the next item is a little more, it has been a little controversial, and so we split it into two sections, 3A and 3B. Mark that down, and I will cede this to my notable
So on the number 13, we can make it as 3B. So this is a 767 Amsterdam Avenue, Guacamole Taqueria. This is a site that has been a little problematic for us. Last time we denied them a change of method of application. This time they came a little bit better prepared. They are proposing to change the method of operation to include serving alcohol in the back area, in the backyard. Now, to accomplish this, and to minimize the noise effect of the area, they have committed to build a what do you call it?
So what happens is we disapprove with certain stipulations. And let me explain, if we just categorically approve, then they wouldn't have to follow any of the stipulations. And because the neighbors and the donut were so adamant about this, and they had been with us repeatedly, we disapprove with the following stipulations, and that is the patio closes Sunday through Thursday at 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday stays open till 11. A sound mitigating canopy or device must be installed over the patio before food or liquor is served. No music of any kind shall be allowed in the patio space. Any speakers must be removed. Or non-essential staff shall not hang out after hours in the space. Got a lot of complaints about that. And a manager must be on premises during the hours of operation of the restaurant. So here's the thing. We are voting to disapprove with stipulations, and that means that they will ultimately get their back patio, but they will have to follow certain guidelines. So that's the vote. So if you vote for this, Mark, you have a question?
Just wondering how the neighbors reacted to your stipulations.
They were actually supportive of the stipulations, and they contributed to the list of stipulations, because these are the things, these were the issues that really, that they were really concerned with, and they'd already lived through. And anyway, yeah, Andrew?
If there's a violation of your stipulations, how long before there's another chance to vote on this application for anything?
2 years. Yeah, but the point is, if there were no stipulations, they get it, they're going to get it anyway. Okay. Jay?
Has the applicant agreed to submit this as a method?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay, that's great.
That was
Yeah.
okay.
What is the effectiveness of the sound mitigating canopy? Is there another example in our district of that being used and effective?
Before we answer that, going back to your question, the resolution as written is approval unless the following is included in the method of operation. So all those stipulations have to be included in the method of operation for them to be approved.
Okay. We've had several examples of this in backyard, the patios and where they're serving in backyard, and it doesn't cut out it doesn't eliminate the sound, but it mitigates the problem. And it's New York, and if you live on a donut and there's a restaurant in back, there's going to be some noise, unfortunately, but it does have it is effective, fairly effective. He has no seating in the back. Right. That was what he agreed to.
Disapproval with stipulation.
No, that's, but we have had examples of this over the years at the restaurants on Amsterdam Avenue. There was, but anyway, let's call the question.
There is no.
I'm sorry? Bustan was a great example, but they actually, and they put on a can.
Just for the minutes.
Yeah.
So then we're gonna vote on 3B
We're
as
voting,
well.
we're voting on 3A first, and we're gonna vote on 3B.
Can you just be clear with everybody what the disapproval means? If you vote for the disapproval without stipulation, I think there's some confusion.
It's a disapproval.
Okay, so if we're voting on 3A, and then 3B will be number 13.
Yeah.
Okay.
So really, it's a disapproval with stipulations, and that are entered into their method of operation. You can abstain, I think, because if you approve, and that's not what Josh is.
And what is B gonna be?
B is a change of ownership, basically. It's a change of corporate name. No problem with that. They'd added some investors, and so that's what they were doing.
3B is where 13 is.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to call 3A?
Okay, 3A, all in favor?
Favor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34.
I'm going to ask again, if board members could sit next to the board table. It's really very hard to count when people are sitting all over the room.
Those opposed?
We'll share next to the board table.
Opposed? 2. Abstain? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay, so the next is 3B, and that was a change of corporate name, and we all felt on the committee that was kind of a no-brainer, so, all in favor, call the question?
Those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. Those opposed? Abstaining? 1, 2.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda, number 4, 413 Amsterdam Avenue. This was on enclosed sidewalk cafe renewal. In this particular case, the applicant did not show up, so we disapprove the application. So, all those in favor?
Are they on the agenda tomorrow?
I don't know.
We asked, actually, we asked John.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43. Opposed? Abstained?
Okay, so the next item on the agenda, number 5, 485 Columbus Avenue. This is also on closed sidewalk cafe renewal. They were making no changes to their to the sidewalk cafe from before. They were well posted. They had support from the community, and we voted to approve it.
Can we combine it with 6? Are there any controversies in 6?
No.
The things are new ones, Richard, they're not new.
We're on 5.
We're on
Okay, all those in favor?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43. Opposed? Abstaining?
Okay, over there.
I'm sorry.
So, number 6.
Okay.
This is the new enclosed sidewalk cafes.
It's kind of a misleading because it's only one, it's Marinara.
So, these ones, there was no opposition to the public on any of them, and we voted to approve. All those in favor?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44. Opposed? Put that hand up. Opposed? Abstaining?
Okay, so number 7, it was also a new sidewalk cafe application. This is 2020 Broadway. In this one, they came up with a plan that would have extended their sidewalk cafe 11 feet from the building. Traditionally, on our district, we like to keep them to up to 9 feet from the building. So we asked them to submit new plans to comply with the 9 feet rule, and we didn't hear from them. So we're turning this into a straight disapproval right now. So this is about to disapprove. Yes.
This is Shakespeare Company, right?
Correct.
Now, I'm not clear, they're asking for an outdoor?
Sidewalk cafe, unenclosed sidewalk cafe.
Unenclosed. There's ample, that's a very wide part of the street.
It is,
Yes.
except that we still have our guidelines, which, you know.
The 9 feet.
Yeah.
Right.
And they came in with 11.
And they didn't just correct it immediately, maybe they had misunderstood it just as
We asked them.
no brainer from asking about what their decision should be.
Robert, we asked them to come back and we said resubmit,
Right.
and then we would vote on it, and we would turn the disapproval to an approval with full board, but they didn't resubmit.
Seems silly, okay.
So maybe they'll come back next month and that will be it.
Okay, so any other question? Okay, so calling the question, this is about to disapprove. All those in favor?
Favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41. Opposed? 1. Abstaining? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5.
Bring it up together. Okay, we are moving along to,
I have a question for the committee, set on the agenda, but something I'd like to catch up with, if I may. And
well, why don't you talk to them after?
Let's talk after, otherwise it's out of order. Thanks.
Can you hear me? Seema, I'm going to pass the mic back and forth because it's a bit cumbersome. As I told our committee this evening, as we drafted or reviewed this particular bill, it's unique. I don't recall, and I feel kind of like an elder statesman on the community board, but I don't remember ever looking at a state bill to approve.
And so this is very important. And you may say, and I'm going to tell you some of the comments in my description of this to help you understand why this is so important. Because obviously you know that we've been working on super talls and the void, and suddenly we get a state bill presented. And the reason is this. First of all, why the state? Well, the multiple dwelling law, on which many of our residential regulations are based, started there. Everybody assumes that it's our zoning resolution, but it's not. It's the other way around. So this is perfectly acceptable to have the state actually intervene on what has become an architectural crisis in terms of the change of our city without anybody really understanding the ramifications of the super tall buildings all over New York. So this started through a bunch of nonprofits and all the community boards around Central Park. And I have to give credit to Roberta. She has a wonderful committee that meets at Landmark West called Excessively Tall Buildings. And she started this, getting more and more people involved so that we were more informed. The second question, why are we voting on this when there is a parallel series of actions being taken through city planning, through our council members who've been very, very vocal, as have our borough president. And the issue is that it is a very manipulative agency. I hate to say it as an architect. Ira and Peter probably feel somewhat the same way, that the problem is that when the city council hearings took place, and many of us went and heard them, and I should include Ethel and Richard in this as well, because although I'm going to make him an honorable AIA, we do have Ethel as an expert on our zoning. And we can't survive without you. It's all. So the issue was, why are we looking at this when the city planning should be doing their job? And at the hearing, they had a bunch of engineers, mechanical engineers, come in and comment, and it went from a 20-foot, which was our floor to floor height for the mechanical space, spaced every 75 feet. If you think of that building on Park Avenue, 432, that was the role model for this piece of legislation. At the hearing, the engineer said, oh, no. You have to have many more feet. You know, equipment's getting bigger. People need more cooling, you know. And the reality is, as we all said, no one's going to live in these buildings. Peter has been keeping me informed of the sales prices, which are plummeting because they're not, I mean, how many billionaires can we actually afford 1,000 feet in the air? Apparently not as many as the developers thought. So the engineers sort of manipulated the city planning group, and we've now got it back down, we think, through the city council to 20. Sorry, to 25. They wanted 30. I beg your pardon. So the issue is we still think that's far too high for a floor-to-floor ceiling height floor-to-floor height, when you consider that equipment is actually getting smaller, more compact, more controls, digital readouts, all sorts of things. You don't need these big cooling plants, but you do, in defense of Ira, who is always standing up for the odd man out in terms of architecture, that sometimes you have mixed-use housing and other things, and you do need special equipment. And sometimes this equipment needs to go in a taller space. But here's the conundrum, which this legislation actually takes care of. And that is, go ahead, use your mechanical floor. This one is for 12 feet. If you need more mechanical space and you take more on another floor, it counts towards your FAR. It's no longer free. So that's why the salient difference in this one is in here. Now, is it going to solve it? No, because I can already tell you how it's going to be manipulated. And Peter was on to a very interesting thing about, instead of measuring things by square footage and height, maybe it should be done by cubic measurement, so that you get the air space, the space behind your unit that you need to maintain.
Because we both figured, and I think Ira mentioned this at one of our meetings, that people might take half a floor. Well, that's fine, because you can transfer half the floor you're not using, you won't pay for, but the other half you will. So it's fair. The idea is to bring developers into the realistic marketplace, and this is a start. Now, the third question is, why are we voting on this first before everything else? Because actually, we did vote on the other one before for the Department of City Planning. But the reality is this is going up to Albany tomorrow. I believe it's being voted on Thursday. And I think the council member is terrific. She has, the assembly member or assembly person is terrific. She's got, I think, numerous candidates lined up to support her, not only in the assembly, but I believe in the Senate as well. So we're optimistic that this will take hold. So question number 4 is, how is this going to impact the vote in the city? The hope is that the city will start realizing what we've been trying to get at as a community, and they will revise and move the height downward. So I hope that addresses things, but I'm sure there's more questions. Any questions?
Is Gus here still?
No, but we have Caitlin.
Okay, it's definitely being voted on?
I believe it is. It's going before the floor, or whatever you do with the bill. I'm ignorant on here. Oh, it's going to committee. Sorry.
Can you check on that? I feel like Gus did not say the same thing earlier when we spoke.
Correct. He's going to text. Yeah, but whatever it is, we need this to go through because this is setting the stage for everything else.
What he said was we can't wait a moment.
Okay, well, I'm just going to say,
my bad, because I don't know anything about politics. I know about policy.
okay, well, regardless, I'm just going to assert that I don't think this should be a state matter. I don't think we should be addressing this at the state level. I think we're just encouraging more matters to keep going through the state as opposed to city processes, and I'm opposed to this resolution.
Well, the only thing, as I said at the beginning, this is the first time, and this is acceptable in my view and others because the multiple dwelling law is dealing with residential housing and mixed residential that New York City's zoning regs are built on. Peter?
I just want to add one thing. We normally, when one of our elected officials comes to us and asks us to support their legislation, we try and be as supportive as we can.
What? What? Well, I think we should definitely support this. Whether it's the state level, often legislation, especially on matters of city planning and housing and so forth, starts at the state level and is followed on the city level. But I think we got to do something to move quickly.
Paige, first of all, you referred several places to the draft of the resolution. Do you mean, I assume you mean a draft of the bill? That you're talking about, okay. So normally, and we have, by the way, in the past, passed resolutions supporting state legislative bills, and normally we have a draft of the bill that we're being asked to vote on. So all I want to know is that the outline, the scheme that you've provided with regard to FAR, but this isn't this.
No, but
That's the bill, but I just want to be clear. So Linda has agreed to adopt this language with regard to the various levels and to amend her bill.
I'm going to let Rich read.
Go ahead, Rich.
What you have here, our resolution,
right,
is a paraphrase of Linda's bill. Linda's bill has gone through a metamorphosis in part based on several of our suggestions that don't, the suggestions don't appear here because they were adopted by Linda. The only suggestion that we made that was not adopted, has not yet been adopted, is at the end where it's a little complicated, but basically the bill as proposed provides for an additional floor area for 12 feet, above 12 feet, and provides for a doubling of the floor area between 12 and 24 feet. Our view, or my view, was that that would encourage someone who wanted to build a 13-foot floor to maybe build a 23-foot floor because there wouldn't be any additional penalty. So what we suggested and what Linda said she will look at and consider is having a graduated increase in the floor area depending on where between 12 feet and 24 feet or between 24 and 36. I think it makes it more palatable and a little fairer. But
now I'm looking at the bill, and the bill does contain the C.
Yes.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
The second thing is, so she'll have to amend the bill, which means it has to go, just for procedurally, it has to go to bill drafting and be amended into an apron. Then it has to go to committee. Then it has to go to the floor. It has to be on the member's desk for at least 3 session days. So it's not happening this week.
We know it's not happening this week, but they did ask us to do it this month, and session is going to end the end of June. Shelley is next, and then I'll go back to the other side.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a strategic move. Okay, many of us at the last land use committee meeting were concerned about usurping the authority of city council moving ahead to the state. We want these issues to be clarified. The modifications have taken place from what we understand with this resolution, more to our liking. And this will be a document that we can use to influence our city council people also, because they'll see what may be coming down from the state and they're going to consider it more seriously. And so I consider this a strategic move and encourage your approval.
We're going to just take a few comments on this.
Oh, it's not a comment, it's just a point of information. Does this legislation deal solely with the mechanical voids, or it does other things?
Any space, and it's intentionally.
Any void, does it deal solely with voids?
It's intentionally drafted.
I'll ask it a different way. Does this have any other restrictions on buildings as to height or the residential floor heights? It just deals with the size of voids. Okay.
And that, in turn, is what jacks up the height on.
Right, I understand.
All right, very quickly.
Very quickly, any number of people have heard me say this before. The goal of what we're trying to do, I'm not arguing about, but I think, as Lewis's first comment was, this is a issue of home rule. This is an issue of integrity of the ULURP process. This is an end run around both of those, and that's a big problem for me. It's a conceptual problem. And as an architect, I've seen the first draft of this, I've seen what's here, and I can promise you there are more holes in this than there are in any piece of Swiss cheese you're ever going to find. So I think it's an invitation to more problems. I think City Council can write something, and I think City Planning can write something that works if they're motivated.
We're going to take 2 more comments for people who have not spoken.
I was just curious if there is a precedent on this board of going to state legislators when the city council is acting on something that we don't like how they handle it, so we just go to the state.
This was initiated.
This issue has come up before.
But just generally speaking.
I don't think that's come up before, but generally speaking, we do try and support our local legislators. I'm going to call on Jeanette and Ethel, and then we're going to call the question. And you're going to have to come up.
I think it was the 1926 State Enabling Act that gave permission to cities to enact the zoning code, made it official legally, and correct me on that. So I do think the state has a role to play here. I think the proposal is very messy. We shouldn't be, the state should not be telling us that ceiling height should be 12 feet or 13 feet or such. The state, however, should be involved in issues of safety, light, air, protection. And so I feel this is a very messy way to address a very urgent problem. And I wish that there was ways to rewrite the legislation so that it was something that had a greater impact and didn't set a precedent of the state getting into the nitty-gritty of what a building ceiling height should look like.
I do agree with the last comments of Ira and Jeanette. You know, something that this board spent a lot of time on, namely the zoning text amendment having to do with voids at City Planning. This is a related matter in order to try to control the loopholes in the zoning resolution, and the board did vote for the text amendment put forward by the administration reluctantly, but also clearly said that we will do that, but there is much more to do. Okay, now you also know, I hope, that next week on May 16th, the City Council will be voting on the text amendment that was passed by City Planning and is going to try to change it. So it's a parallel move, and we should look at that as well. I'm just keeping you abreast of what the city imperfectly has been doing and why we and others should be moving with all pressure at the city level to rectify some of the loopholes and some of the difficulties that we have been seeing. I don't think this is the best way, even though I admire and respect the assembly member. So lastly, I do go along with the two colleagues who just spoke. I think that this is somewhat confused, not helpful, and may offer precedents that we prefer not to do, even if the heart somehow is in the right place.
I wanted to address the last few comments. I was at the start of this process in the same camp that I didn't want the state to be telling the city how to zone its property. The reason I came around is that what this bill does, it doesn't create a new statute. It amends a definition in an already existing state statute dealing with multiple dwellings. The second reason I came around is that the amendment passed by city planning was so bad and so insulting to those of us who care about this sort of thing, that I was prepared to make an exception to my view that the city should take care of its own business. The city planning proposal would allow a 200 feet of void on the project at 66th Street, which is 40 feet more than the developer is asking for. I won't go into the details because it's not pertinent, but the city planning proposal, if anything, is a step backwards, not a step forward. And for that reason, I overcame my reluctance to have the state get involved. I hope never to have to do it again. I've been on the board a long time. We've never done it before. And normally, the state and the city are in sync about these things. But this is an exceptional situation to address an exceptional problem.
Call the question. All those in favor?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Did you have your hand up before? Or?
Yes.
Okay. Those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Somebody get 6, 6, 7.
Any abstaining?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Hold your hand up if you're abstaining.
Abstained, yeah.
7, 8, 9.
That's
it.
37-9.
So it passes.
So it's 37-10, right, Roberta?
37, 10, 0.
10.
Hi, everyone. So this is the presentation. We have 4 resolutions for your consideration. But before I do that, I'm going to put in the first word to encourage all of our new members to come to preservation, not this month, because this month it'll be the rotunda and you won't see us by ourselves, but we're a fun bunch, we're small, we're tight. There are often snacks, not when the rotunda is on the agenda, but so please come see us, because I think when I joined the board 11 years ago, I had no intention of being on the preservation committee, but I was won over because it was interesting work and has a lot to do with what it feels like to walk around our streets. So let's go to our first resolution. It has to do with 400 West End Avenue. Do I have that right? Yes. And it's hard to see, but there's a dotted line up here and over here. And it actually goes around the other side. This is a building with 2 primary facades, one on 79th Street and one on West End Avenue. The apartment keeps going around the corner, so yes, this is one of those apartments. Okay, so there's the secondary facade, okay? And so those are the windows that are in question. Please go to the next. And what they're proposing, so here's is there one more? There it is, thank you. So the original condition from the, and it's really grainy because we're expanding a tax photo from 1940. But that's what the windows used to look like. It's a casement where the middle 2 panels with divided light open out. There are fixed panels on either side and then a little transom thing that carries it forward. Now if you go backward, you see what the existing condition and the proposed condition. The existing condition is a replacement from pre-designation, and it was replaced with 1/1 double hung windows. Pretty much throughout. In fact, I'm pretty sure 100% of the original windows are gone. But the reason that this application is before you today is that the LPC will not approve at staff level a replacement that doesn't match the original fabric, not the fabric at the time of designation. The wrinkle here is that the building is working on a master plan. And master plan will, as the name connotes, will set the template for the windows going forward into the future. It is not a building-wide replacement, which is what happened to this building in the early 1980s. Our committee was divided on the issue of whether or not we should require them to go back to the divided light casement windows, which, by the way, would be very expensive. They're metal, they're not as energy efficient, or they could be. Divided light is more expensive than the fixed panels and so forth. But we were unanimous on the issue of waiting for the master plan. As our colleagues pointed out, among other things, if these folks jump the gun, and then there is and the master plan calls for a different color, a different treatment. There are ways in which the windows fit into the molds, into the window openings and so forth. If they're done differently, it will, one of the things we try to avoid is a hodgepodge effect. Well, we would be creating one anyway. So the resolution in front of you is to disapprove for the reason that we want to wait for the master plan. Are there any questions on this one? Richard?
Did anyone represent the building
No, I don't think so. The architect was aware that the building was working on master plan.
Do you have any idea whether working on these dreams or almost on paper or where it is?
So I was at LPC today on a different matter, and there they had a letter from the co-op board saying we're on it. So we didn't have that, but we had the sense from the architect that they were serious, not just pie in the sky thinking about it. Any other questions? Oops, I'm sorry. Yes, Stephen. So our committee has been going down to LPC and trying to make our pitch with whatever it is our board tells us to say. And so the pitch here would be one that I think they want to hear. They also share the concern about a modeled effect or an inconsistent or hodgepodge effect. That said, there is an application that's alive, and it's possible that they would supersede. That said, our committee still thinks that the right answer, and sometimes we disagree with LPC, we think the right answer is do it once and do it right. Anybody else? So I'm going to ask.
This vote is essentially.
Say again.
Do it once. This vote is do it once and do it right.
That's what I'm going to say.
You just say it.
Yes. So we need to, yes, correct. And there's no suggestion that the architect was aware of our disapproval and had the opportunity to come back to us and say the master plan is on its way, and didn't do that. So I'm sorry, Madge.
Landmarks also tell us that buildings that were as simple as this one should go back to the very original, because if we have another case here, we can improve it. And then they send it back and said, no, we want the original windows with the very simple.
That was the application that was on LPC today. I'm going to talk to you. Actually, in your email at home, you'll find the result of that vote. But anyway, so seeing no more questions, let's call the question on this. All those in favor of the disapproval?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. Those opposed? Abstained? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, the next one is 200 West 83rd Street. I apologize because I managed to mangle the PDF and it didn't come through. So this is 200 West 83rd Street. It has two primary facades, one on Amsterdam Avenue, one around the corner on 83rd Street, the first of several buildings of its type. Oh, thank you. I was going to say, those of you who know the area, Fred's Restaurant is right here. But if we could curl back toward, whoops, sorry, no, let's go back down the street, if you would please, and show us the check cashing place. There you go. Sorry. Okay, so this is what the application concerns mostly. I mean, there is some cleaning up of front entranceways on 83rd Street. They're making the doorway a little simpler. Right now it has metal work and grills and so forth that harken back to a time when our neighborhoods weren't quite as safe. But this is the main part of the project. Yes, that is a picket fence that Fess Parker would have liked from the Daniel Boone TV show of my youth. There is a check cashing place, and then it's hard to see, but underneath the Western Union sign, there are, oh, here they are, here's some here. There are diagonal slats of rough hewn wood. Yes, this was a product of the 1970s. There is a ramp down into that store because the entrance is below grade. Actually, the entrance to Fred's is too, but we're mostly concerned with here. And to make the long story short, they're proposing to take out this little piece of the building there, replace it with a gray Pacific basalt, I'm not sure how to pronounce that word, basalt, thank you, in two different colors of gray, light and dark granite. And if you notice, there are these interesting variation bands in the fenestration and in the underneath the fenestration of the building. They're going to carry those forward in lines that line up with this and replace this fence, replace all of this with storefront infill of the type that you're used to seeing on Columbus and Amsterdam Avenues. The other thing that's interesting about it is in lieu of this space here, so they're going to make the store a little smaller, and there's going to be a doorway and a fixed panel window here, basically floor to ceiling, that will have a counterpart on the donut side. And what will happen is that it'll become a package room for the residents of the building, kind of an interesting use. But the effect for us is that you can walk along the sidewalk and look through the windows and see the donut. So this aligns with some of our core values about preserving donuts and so forth, as well as it being a handsome storefront infill and solution to this rather unsightly process. The other part that's interesting about it is that up here, in lieu of this fence, there'll be a parapet wall, and then there'll be a tangle of wrought iron that will emulate vines, and then they'll plant plantings that don't hew to the building. They'll actually grow along those metal pieces and look like a floral vine entree into the donut green space behind. My words are not doing it justice, but I hope if you have your imagination. There'll be a replacement of the railing along here with something a lot more rectilinear, and that's essentially the project. Are there questions about it? I'm sorry, question?
There's no picture.
I'm afraid I don't. That's what I mangled. So no, there is a rendering.
Those in favor?
What are we voting for?
I'm sorry. So the resolution is to approve, and our suggestion, but not requirement, is that they include some of that vine work in the railing along here. So that.
I have a question.
Okay.
You talked about the door fronts on 83rd Street. Or is that 83rd?
It's on 83rd, yeah.
I'm one of your maybe, so I was able to see what it looked like. It's really nice. But it's different than all the other, I walked by there the other day. It's different than all the other doors.
That's correct. The same owner of this building owns there are like 4 or 5 buildings in a row. They own all of them. And their proposal is to change the doors in all of them. They don't need a public hearing or us to approve that for the other buildings. The only reason it was included in our presentation is because they had to get our approval for this.
So they told us and we're going to change the doors on all.
That's my recollection, yes.
Okay, I forgot that. Thank you.
The question is called.
Okay.
Those in
All those in
favor?
favor?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41. Opposed? Abstaining? 1, 2. 2.
Okay, thank you. Next one is 301 West 96th Street. This is the. Oh, this is 313? I'm sorry. Okay, I saw 301 come up before. Okay, this is, as you know, there are steps up into commercial spaces on Columbus Avenue, especially when there's a change in the grade. This is a clever idea. The proposal is to create one ramp that would serve 3 different stores. It's actually a great idea because of the slope that's required, you couldn't actually put 3 separate ramps in. So this is probably the only way to solve this problem with storefronts that are this close together. Your resolution includes a recitation of the materials, but they are handsome and appropriate. It's not that high a rise, so for code, they do not require a railing to go along the front of this. Our committee, and you'll see the resolution asks for a proviso that there would be an additional ramp for the concern that, especially at night, when someone stepped out of one of the storefronts in the middle, they might not feel the corrugation on the pavement and step off and not see that there was a ledge there. We had a request that we soften that, and so the committee is prepared to accept as friendly an amendment to make it that it was a recommendation that we would call for additional railing, but not a condition. And I see Barbara.
That's very nice. Okay, full disclosure, I am the executive director of the Columbus Avenue Business Improvement District, and the person who owns these 4 stores is one of my board members and the landlord. And I wanted to make this point to you, which you may not be aware of, and that is that Columbus Avenue, we have many buildings that are out of compliance, and it's very, very difficult. We beg our landlords to please make their places compliant. And because we're in a landmark district, there is a catch-22 with generally with LPC. In this case, for this drawing that you see here, it was approved both by LPC and it is ADA acceptable as is. Now, my landlord is paying $500,000 to do this. That is what it costs, and that is why we can't get anybody else to do it. And so I'm asking you to let this resolution be to approve it without that second rail. The objection, and I have to say that I feel exactly the same way, is that visually it will disturb and have a black band across the whole thing. It's not necessary. It has been approved as is without that ramp. And, you know, our shops don't stay open that late. They're not really open in the dark. And these ramps are not for people who have sight issues, but just for people in general. So anyway, that I would appreciate it if you would consider doing that.
Barbara, I want to thank you very much. And I want to remind our board members, and I want to remind, and for our new board members who don't know, Barbara has a conflict of interest, and so she cannot vote on this, and she is allowed to speak, which she just did very well. And when she votes, her vote will not count. So she will record on the column that says not eligible. And so that will not be part of the quorum for the vote. And so I just remind all board members, thank you very much, Barbara. I appreciate that you were on the board before and so kind of knew this. Thank you.
I have a question.
Let's go over here first, then we'll go around.
Thank you, Mark. I just want to manage what you're I just want to strongly disagree with the railing being a suggestion, not a condition. I don't think we can underestimate the safety factor. If you take into account the weekend shopping congestion and how many people are going to be on that ramp at the same time, you're not going to see it. You're going to walk backwards. You're going to fall over. You're going to have all kinds of lawsuits and injuries, severe injuries. But what I also observe is that this is not an uncommon solution around the city, certainly around the older parts in the Soho area where you have these ramps that cover several storefronts. There's always the option of a short few steps to each store in addition to the ramp. So, you know, I admire and I like the ADA compliance, but there is a severe safety risk here without a railing. And the design, doesn't matter how high it is, if you can fall 3 feet, if you're 65 years old, you fracture everything, and then, you know, that's it. You know, so if you can do that demographic for who's not going to shop in these stores, then, you know, I might support your proposition, but this is a severe issue. And I would also like to see the alternative few steps that the shoppers have a choice to make in addition. What is that?
One more question. Mark, well, one observation, Barbara is not disqualified from voting. Second,
Not
my
without
question,
ruling by the COIP.
I know the COIP, she's not disqualified. But anyway, my question, I think Barbara was asking, how high is this ramp off the sidewalk? Because normally you would expect a rail.
Okay, so the answer to Robert and to Jay and to Barbara is that this is about one step up. It is not the kind of situation where there's a cliff. And that's why we were happy to change to a recommendation. And by the way, our recommendation is not to have a rail go all the way along, but just to have a visual demarcation. And it's a recommendation, so the LPC as well as the landlord can ignore us and just build it as is. I'm interested in your statement that it was approved by LPC. I think what you meant is that the staff said go ahead with this, but it's still calendared to go for the commission, and it will either way.
Maybe 10 years for the piece of property. So I think the first one is really move forward with something.
We'll wait 1 second. So I am offering to make it a recommendation, but not a requirement. Your option is to make a motion to amend our resolution to remove that recommendation. So that I leave that to you. Recommendation is just a recommendation. It's not, yeah, okay. Recommendation is that they include the railing, but it's not a requirement or a condition of our approval.
Mark, do you or Barbara know where these stores get their deliveries? Is it on the Columbus side or is it on the side street or?
That wouldn't be a preservation issue.
I'm asking because if there's
The guy with the
a.
hand truck is gonna love it. Okay, are we ready to call the question? Okay, Richard.
I understand that it's only one step. But people will not see the step necessarily coming out of the store. I don't think you need a red. If you have a yellow line on the floor of the, next to the drop-off, or some other visual or physical demarcation, that would be sufficient. It wouldn't affect the aesthetics of the thing. And I don't think it should be a recommendation. I think it should be a condition.
Okay, well, give me 1 second, because you offered a fact, and I want to acknowledge it and say that the tile that will become the cap of the edge of the ramp, so the edge that would be the step down, has texture, just like those ramps that go down to make a sidewalk cut for handicap to go across the street. The problem is that it's not color balance, it's simply texture. Okay, and I'm pretty sure that's a Department of Buildings issue, not an LPC issue. I'm happy to say that, well, I'm happy. All right, one at a time.
We need to address, we're approving something.
Okay.
That could be a hazard. And
So
we have an obligation to call something.
Okay.
It's common sense. Excuse me.
Well, that's
common sense.
That's where the recommendation came.
Instead of saying you can do painting or a different pattern. This could be decided.
So would it be acceptable to say that we have a strong recommendation that the edge be marked by color, texture, or railing?
Not a strong recommendation. Vision.
All right, so that's going to have to be a motion.
That's why I made the motion.
All right, hang on. So we need a second. Someone please second. Okay. So now we're going to discuss the resolution and the amendment. We have Jeanette. That's come to me.
I think when somebody usually parents walk they walk into open gates on the side. My worry isn't so much somebody going to and from the store because they will see it, but somebody walking on the sidewalk. If it's a subtle, less than a step, and if it's not bright yellow or something, they're going to trip on it as soon as it's dusk or night. So I want to know, if we approve this, are we saying that we're liable to the lawsuit that happens? Or should we really say, this looks like it could be a mistake, so each address the same word,
We certainly do not underwrite any of the things that we do, that we recommend or approve. There is, by the way, a railing here. It is perpendicular to the face of the building, so if someone's walking along close to the building line and doesn't feel or see the ramp in front of them, that would be a barrier. So the only place is when you're walking along toward, perpendicular from the curb to the store. But I hear you.
So the operative action that we are seeking is safety. The way we can do it is use the verb. We are requiring that this condition be addressed. We suggest, recommend several ways to address this. One, a railing, clear painting that is regularly permitted, change in the nature of the material. Any of those need to be part of a requirement. That's what this is about.
Is that your motion?
Yeah, but I mean, let's just go a little further. If that's tile on the edge of that precipice there, it's very simple to change the color of the tile.
Exactly.
You don't have to paint anything, you doesn't have to be gaudy. It can be very aesthetic, as long as it's different from.
It will breathe. Something you can see.
Well, I can't.
We're ready to discuss it.
All right, so let's just, let's go down the line. Rick?
Quick question. This is a preservation issue. What jurisdiction do we have to be concerned about safety beyond making a recommendation?
It is not an issue that LPC will consider, but we're allowed to bring our concerns to the fore in a resolution. Ira?
Okay, 2 comments. There's a ramp like this that has just been built in the middle of the block north of the Gristedes entrance between 84th and 85th Street. Just been completed in the last few weeks. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, that's one comment. Secondly, the railings and the tactile warnings at the edge of the single step are very clearly delineated in the building code and in an ADA. So this is all out there. Hopefully the architect is familiar with this. That's not guaranteed. Hope the contractor is familiar with this. This is not guaranteed. So if we want to just stress that these regulations exist, so be it, but they do exist. So that a blind person does just not fall off the step and, God knows what. So those are my 2 comments.
Thanks. Shelley?
I was going to give the same background, but I think the texture and the color, tasteful color, would go a far way, as it does on subways and other places and on street corners. I think that's a good recommendation.
Simple question. It seems that this is de minimis enough, but it looks like the grade change is rather shallow. And my question is, without saying steps, because that's a very non-precise term, we deal in inches and feet and all. So what is the grade change? And is there a grade change from north to south on Columbus? And if it's really de minimis, I'd be inclined to support it without a railing.
So it is shallow enough that a railing is not required by code. The code does say that if it's above, I believe it, so the architects will know this better, if it's 8 or 10 inches, then it has to have a rail. So is it 6? Thank you, 6 inches.
It's 6 inches at the maximum height.
So this is about 6 inches or less right here.
That's the maximum, and then it's higher or lower from to south and north. What's the maximum grade change? Just by inches. It's a very simple question.
It's not the grade change, it's the height of the railing. Yep. And the height of the railing is...
Not the railing, the top
I'm sorry,
of
the height of the ramp,
sidewalk.
Excuse me, is 6 inches or less for this run right here, and that's the part that we're talking about. Okay. So we have a resolution. I'm sorry, Jay.
Mark, I'm a little confused. If somebody were to come on the north, the entrance to the ramp is from the north.
Correct.
And south. If someone in a wheelchair goes up on this ramp from north to south, going along the ramp 6 inches, and, one of the wheels goes off the side or something, I mean, it seems to me, code notwithstanding, there should some barrier, whether it's a short barrier or a rail, something to prevent that from happening.
There's a small, no, actually, no. Do you know, is there a lip?
No, it's flush.
It's flush. That's where we got off on this. That's why we started thinking about this.
To make it mandatory to put some sort of visual mark.
What number?
It's a procedural vote, so you don't have to write it on your sheet.
And this is for a visual marking?
No, it's auditory.
No, visual auditory.
It's auditory, it's whether you can hear the pen.
Could we make it smell?
I got 33 hanging, baby.
That's all. We do need to record the vote. All right, so, okay. 34. Anybody against? Abstaining?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay. Okay, so now, I think we've had enough discussion, yes? We're gonna call the question, we're calling the question on the resolution as amended by Richard's amendment, okay? So all those in favor?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9.
Okay, anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Now we're going, opposed, I'm sorry.
One opposed.
Abstaining, anybody? There's 1, 2, okay, okay.
40-0-2-0.
I told you want to go 301 West 96. So this is the one that's in between that former taco shop and the gas station that you drive in and out of across the sidewalk. And this right here is a Pilates studio. And if you'll notice, here is the entrance to the building, and it has an elevated stair, which blocks the sight line to the Pilates studio from West End Avenue. So is there one more slide? The proposal is to put a, thank you, to put a blade sign that sticks perpendicularly out from the wall. And if there's one more, there's a blade sign. Up high, which ordinarily would not be permitted, that's why it's before you, so that it can be seen from West End Avenue. They also want signage down here, as you see, but this is the reason why it's before you. That kind of a sign requires a public hearing, and it needs to be that high in order to be seen from West End Avenue over the entrance. Anybody have a question? Can we call the question? Yes. All right. All those in favor?
Yeah. So I heard this person speak, and she's so. You are.
All those opposed? Anyone abstaining? Great. Stephen wasn't abstaining. Everybody, I want to thank everybody. I want to remind you, May 21st is our potluck. Please do not put these with your voting sheets. Put these separately. Put the voting sheets separately. They stay better when they're not cut. And have a great month of this.